Okay, friends, glad to be with you. Tim Kirby Russia here, doing sort of impromptu live stream. Our topic today, our overall topic, is about if we're in World War III, friends. I think that's something we've kind of brought up on this channel before. Let me adjust my camera here. But there's a neat article that I think we should read together, and I think we're going to enjoy it, and I think it's going to be very, how would you say, revealing in terms of, you know, are we actually in a soft World War III, as I call it? So we'll see if I agree with the author. We'll see if we don't. There's also an interesting article that, or let's just say, breakdown of Trump's opinion that he thinks Israel's doing terrible PR. I thought that would be something also interesting to cover. And then after that, there might be a little smidge of American Village news, and then our good old questions and comments. Remember, if you have any questions, if you write anywhere on the Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore channel, if you basically comment under anything, it all appears in a location that I call the chat, and that chat is just one big feed. So you write something, I'll see it. And if you want to use the raise your hand feature to join in on the program, you can do that near the end. So anyways, let's shift over here to my other screen here, and let's take a look about this here article. Now, this gent here, Fyodor Lukyanov, World War III has started. Here's what it will look like. Fyodor Lukyanov, I actually know him. I've met him a few times. I don't know him very well, but I can't say I've met him. So anyways, this is for RT. So let's see what he has to say. The next act in the sad trilogy of global wars will be a scattered but long conflict. And he is the editor-in-chief of Russia in Global Affairs and president of the Council of Foreign and Defense Policy and research director of the Valdai International Discussion Club. And that's where you've probably seen his face before, because he's at every one of those big Valdai meetings. So anyways, let's see what he has to say. And I'm going to boost the size of the font here ever so slightly. There we go. That still fits on the screen. Amazing. All right. Good stuff. The journalistic cliche that World War III is already underway has often circulated from one publication or another for decades. Okay, we're going to stop right there because that's one thing that has bothered me, friends, is it does kind of drive me nuts when people are really hyperbolic. And I'm not being a hypocrite here because I really do believe that what is happening with the war in Ukraine and now especially the war in Gaza, the potential conflict that's in Taiwan, that this time it's different. And I think a lot of people love to, ding that alarmist bell. But in the past, you didn't have like a proxy war between superpowers, nuclear superpowers, and now we have a potential also, not a proxy war, but a sort of civil war within another nuclear power. So, and the sides are, we'll talk about my opinion later. Let's get back to the article. What am I doing? So anyways, I just really appreciate that he started off with the fact that people have been sort of crying wolf about being in World War III. Alex Jones, you know who you are. Anyways, so let's see. Indeed, since the beginning of the 21st century, when the U.S. was attacked on the 11th of September 2001, people have been talking about a clash of civilizations as a new form of global conflict. Then Washington declared a war on terror, got bogged down in the Middle East, before disappearing from the agenda altogether. And that is also hilarious because as we bring up on this channel, remember, there was a global war on Islamic extremism that has since vanished because Russia. Instead, the good old rivalry... Oops, why is it doing that? Stop trying to take a screenshot. The good old rivalry between the major countries was gradually revived, first in the political propaganda and economic spheres, but with an increasingly pronounced military and force element. Okay, let's get to the juicy stuff. Today, the idea of a World War III is fathomable. And sir, Mr. Lukyanov, I would say it's not only fathomable, I think it's actually happening in a softer fashion. Nevertheless, a similar situation to World Wars I and II seems inadmissible at the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, although some commentators see similar features in the armed conflict in Ukraine. Structurally, however, the state of affairs is very different. Well, that's, if he's going to say that if something has to look exactly like World War I or exactly like World War II in order for them to be considered a world war, that's a little bit of a different standard than saying, like, hey, is it a global war with two sides fighting it out to the bitter end? Then it's a world war, in my opinion. But if something has to behave like the first two wars, then we're probably not going to see a world war ever again, unless technology has surprises for us. So, anyways, what does he say here? He goes on to, that's not the right screen. He goes on to say the presence of nuclear weapons in the hands of the world's major players and a very complex range of significant and diverse players in international politics rule out and make it highly unlikely of a head-on collision between major powers of their blocs. What I just say about nuclear weapons, see, he agrees with me. As was the case in the last century. However, the changes taking place on the world stage and in the balance of power are so serious that they are worthy of a confrontation on the scale of a world war. Okay, so maybe his definition is going to meet my definition. Let's see here. In the past, such shifts have led to major military clashes. However, now the world war that some repeatedly talk about is a chain of large but localized confrontations, each of which in one way or another involves the main players. Balance is on the verge of spilling over from the original zone, and is indirectly linked to other hotbeds of instability. This sequence of military events began with the Middle East conflicts of the last decade, Yemen and Syria, continuing in Ukraine in 2014, the South Caucasus, Okay. I can sort of see that, but I don't know about like everything being localized because, let's just say during World War II, how much did China fight in like the European theater? Or as Colonel McGregor points out very often, it was really the United States that really did the fighting in the Pacific more so than in Europe. And not every sort of Allied power fought in all theaters and all fronts and all locations. And the same thing for the Axis powers. So I don't quite see where he's going here with this, that now the conflict is completely like separate and localized. That's not necessarily that super different. Maybe only in scale and the fact that they're nuclear weapons. So what does he say here now? The end of the status quo means the world is entering a long period of turmoil. I don't know. I don't know about that. Long period of turmoil. Because if the end of the status quo, the Pax Americana, that we might call it here, from the standpoint of the United States, the 30 years of the sort of triumphant period of the United States after the winning the Cold War is coming to an end. I don't know if that necessarily means turmoil. It definitely means that there's going to be stress until somehow enough people in Washington just start reading Dugin's books, and they drop wokeism, and they all become like Eurasianists, and they sort of accept defeat, and that the United States can completely dominate the Northern American continent, and maybe even the Southern American one too, and that would be good enough. But yeah, so until that happens, I don't know, guys. I think that it's not necessarily that we're going to be in turmoil. It's more the sort of death throes of empire. So I'm not quite sure if that's necessarily going to be the case. Because otherwise, like certain conflicts that have been frozen, like North and South Korea, could become active. But I don't know if that would really be turmoil. Turmoil just sounds sort of like an all-over negative downward swing, whereas I think there's actually a lot of positive changes happening on the planet right now. Anyways, international colleagues have already pointed out, in the context of the disappearance of former frameworks and constraints, the very decline of the world order, which now seems to be universally recognized, dormant conflicts and disputes are almost inevitably resurfacing. Like I just said, with the especially, the whole Taiwan thing was pretty much laid to rest for a long time. Well, from a person in the West's perspective, it was laid to rest. Obviously, if you're Chinese, it's probably never really gone off the radar. A lot of things are resurfacing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's turmoil. I don't know, I just don't like that word choice. What has been held back was erupting. In principle, everything is quite traditional. It was so before, and it will be so after. The ideologization of world politics in the 20th century meant that the end of that political period was very ideological in itself. the view that humanity has found the optimal political model. Again, he's referring to the Francis Fukuyama saying that we've reached the end of history, which is what many people believed in like the early 90s. That didn't happen. History is still going. The belief that the continuous contours of state borders will not change in the 21st century or only by mutual agreement because it has been decided and established this way, blah, 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 blah. So essentially the sort of Pax Americana was assured that there really wouldn't be much war. But guess what? War is part of human nature, friends. In fact, at some point on our series... Oops, that's not it. On some part of our series on Eurasian ideas... we'll actually have to cover sort of the inevitability of war, along with a lot of other ugly inevitabilities that are inescapable. Try as we might, we can't really get rid of them. I was kind of want to talk about maybe some of those Eurasian ideas today, but to be honest, guys, I've been sleeping terribly lately, waking up at weird times, going to sleep at weird times, and I'm not on my ideological game today, so I thought I'd take it a little easy here and just go through some very interesting work from other people whose thoughts are more organized than I am and who might actually be able to sleep from time to time. Another thing that the importance of territories is different now than it was in the past. Direct control of certain spaces can now have more costs than benefits. That is absolutely true. That's probably one of the big things that people don't understand in the media, or they choose not to understand, is that like they accuse that Putin would want to take over Poland. Well, you know, the cost of expanding territory can be very expensive. In fact, the cost of rebuilding Ukraine is going to cost quite a pretty ruble. And, you know, it's not like the old days. It's not like some sort of medieval society where more land means more peasants and more peasants means more money. It doesn't necessarily work that way, especially if the land doesn't want you there. So on some level, the more you have, the more you have to pay for. And it's one of those explanations that a lot of people have as to why sometimes smaller countries can be, although they're completely, what people don't understand this is that smaller countries can seem to be much nicer. Like if you ever gone to Cyprus, it's like really nice, and Singapore and this, that, and the other. So in some ways, it's sort of easier to deal with a smaller territory and amount of people to make a nicer system, but at the same time, those places tend to be absolutely and completely helpless. And it's really the bigger countries, both physically, population-wise, economic-wise, that can, let's just say, crush the dreams of smaller locations very quickly. So that's kind of another thing that people kind of miss, the fact that expansion without purpose in the 21st century is just a fool's errand. But also that at the same time, this idea that if everyone lives in some sort of micronation, then they'll be able to live in a paradise because it's easier to manage. Not necessarily. Very, very, very much not necessarily. Especially when one of the big dogs wants to go to your utopia and take stuff from it. But anyways, while indirect influence is much more effective than conquest. That is absolutely true. I mean, if you look at how did the United States win the Cold War? Well, there's a lot of theories as to that, but how they won the hearts of the Soviet elite was by basically convincing them with propaganda that the West was the way to go, that if they sold out the Soviet Union, they could live that super cush Western lifestyle, which many of them got to do. And yeah, that was way more effective than any infantry or tanks or missiles. Of course, nuclear missiles were needed in the Cold War as a deterrent, but the real winner, I think, was the soft power. And soft power is way cheaper than hard power. Way, way cheaper. Because even things like, you know, I think the last time I checked, like the BBC, the news for the BBC, or maybe it was the BBC as a whole, I think it was a whole, cost some kind of crazy amount of money. Like it was like 750 million pounds to operate or something, which is a lot of money. Trust me, that is a lot of money. But, you know, if you think about that in terms of like a military budget, that's not even $1 billion. That's nothing. Like, you know, countries that aren't, like, I'll put it this way, Russia before the war spent like $60 billion on its military. I mean, that's like, so the budgets for propaganda and movies. Again, a major Hollywood movie might cost $100 million to make, $100 million to market, $200 million to make, $200 million to market. You know, an entire Hollywood studio, major Hollywood studio, like, I don't know, Sony Pictures, probably, I don't know, what do they spend in terms of their costs of production than a year to make a few major movies? I don't know, $2-3 billion, something like that. Again, that's a lot of money, but it's pittance compared to the U.S. military budget. So, and if you look at the budgets for video games, you know, if a video game has a budget of $100 million, that's, you know, your super AAA action amazing something that could have worldwide reach and, you know, ramifications. So anyways, he's completely spot on about this whole thing being way cheaper. Anyways, let's go back to the article. Although it is worth noting that 15 or 20 years ago, the height of economic and political globalization, it was often argued that in a fully interconnected flat world, geographical and material proximity no longer mattered. And that's true, and that's one of the reasons why the United States kind of shot itself in the foot, because as soon as people were convinced they were just going to live in the United States, essentially becoming sort of like the capital city of a global entity, that's when we didn't need to have manufacturing or an army that takes itself as seriously as it did. We just needed the army to act kind of like a police force to put down the bad elements in our global society. And that's where a lot of our problems come from. There's a lot of truth in those few words here. The pandemic was the first and most vivid argument against this approach. The current chain of crises have forced a return to more classical ideas about the role of subordination between the regional and the global, and thank frickin' goodness. Again, one of the reasons I picked this article is because I mostly agree with it. Maybe I should have picked an article that I hate. But he's, again, dead on about that now globalism looks like it is laying in its casket. Someone's digging the hole, and it's about to get chucked in there if things continue on in this way. So... oh, what happened? Oh, I see. Oh, so there's some chaos there. I'm pretty sure I was recording, and I'm pretty sure I'm live. According to the little green thing on the screen, I'm live, but people are kind of making it look like it's not. Nope, I see myself. I see myself here. So I don't know, that must be something else, and I am recording. So anyways, back to our article. The disappearance of the status quo means the world has entered a long period of turmoil in which... this turmoil, that's so negative. I actually see this as a positive. This is just, you know, it's restructuring, rebranding, reorganization. I don't think it's that bad. Let's not be doom and gloom. Then again, this is written by a Russian, and Russians like their doom and their gloom, especially together. In the new frameworks have not yet been established, and it's not yet clear what they will be, and the old ones are no longer working. That is super, mega, ultra true. Let's get rid of turmoil here. But, yeah, so in some ways... yeah, like, well, is the UN going to change? Is the UN, which was really, you know, structured on this, the way the world was in 1945, is that going to stay around? What is, and where is BRICS going? Yeah, what is going to be the whole structure of this? We don't know. We don't know, but I think it's kind of interesting, and I don't think it's particularly scary or turmoil. The formal end of the era of the Treaty of Conventional Armed Forces in Europe. Russia has withdrawn from it. The other countries have announced the suspension of their participation. This is an example of the dismantling of existing institutions. Well, you know, one other thing you have to remember, guys, is that a lot of the existing institutions are going to fall apart because they completely benefited a certain collective West. You know, be it the Olympics or be it the Armed Forces in Europe Treaty or whatever. You know, all of these were very one-sided, and as the world gets less one-sided, don't be surprised if old unfair deals get ripped to shreds. The unprecedented intensity of the wave of assaults on the UN from all sides is under attack. Look, it's like, guys, I swear, I only took a skim of this article before. I'm not trying to come here And, like, it's not like I have a bunch of notes in front of me so I can, like, read ahead and make myself sound like I'm as intelligent as someone who's way more successful than I am. But, you know, I've been just called it and just mentioned how I think the entire UN as an entity, as this concept, is very much up for question right now. The whole Security Council thing, why do only they get the vote and they get the super veto power? Why is that? And especially, you know, well, where's the UN located? We know. You know what I mean? We know. And how a lot of the UN and its internal structures don't exactly seem to do the sort of policies and ways of doing things that people in China or Russia or India would see as a good choice. They're very much concerned with their rainbow flags and butt blasted at the gay bar, and that's kind of their agenda. Speaking of agendas, the UN has a lot of agendas, some of them with numbers. So anyways, guys, I think the whole UN is maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I do think that I'll live, hopefully, unless I get assassinated, live to see the sort of end of the UN, or the UN be forced to, like, engage in some sort of 2.0 version or something. So anyways, the current World War III is likely to endure over a long time frame and can be scattered in terms of locations, he says. But based on the results, and there will be a different structure of international organizations will emerge. I agree with this. BRICS is the perfect example of one that already has emerged, as well as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which everyone is like, it's not a military organization, but the primary focus is security. But it's not a military organization. It's technically not. But they go there to talk about, like, security and military issues. How is it not a military thing? Because it says so on some piece of paper. So again, I don't want to get in an argument with anyone here about that, but I think it's a military thing. This is, so anyways, continuing on the article, this is always the case. This does not mean that the UN, for example, will disappear. Like I just, again, Mr. Lukyanov, you should hire me for your think tank there. The Russian language will be terrible, but the insights will be they'll be as if you wrote them. Anyways, this does not mean the UN, for example, will disappear, but there will definitely be a profound correction of the principles on which it operates. So, other than my dislike of one particular word here, which is not a huge problem, I think that Mr. Lukyanov is pretty darn right here that we are in a soft World War III. He thinks it's more approaching. I think we're already here, that it'll have its own sort of unique character, just like World War I and World War II did. That's more my ideas than what he did. But what he thinks that the UN is going to have to change, new international institutions and frameworks that we are either not in place or that haven't, that we don't even know what they are. You know, we may not even know what these institutions and frameworks are. We don't know. It's we're sort of in a new mode where we're trying to design like a new product. It's kind of like we're at the phase where, you know, they were starting to see, hey, we've got this touchscreen technology. It's getting cheaper. Battery technology is getting better. People like their cell phones. Can we make like a pocket computer telephone? How would this work? What can we do with this? I think we're sort of in that like 2007, 8, 9 kind of phase where we're like, we have the parts to make something new that's going to be really awesome. But the question is, how exactly do we put this thing together? How is it going to work? You know? Because trust me, there were a few attempts before your iPhone came around and revolutionized the whole thing. Yeah, they weren't that good. So anyways, I don't think we know quite where we're going, but hopefully we'll get there. So anyways, let's continue on to our next article after I check and see if there's any questions. Oh boy, questions. Let's see. That's not what I wanted to bring up. Anyways, this is one of the things where I one day dream. Oh, do I dream of having my own sort of like production studio? So that way I don't have to fiddle around with trying to look for these questions and stuff. Christopher says, new product World War II, Barbenheimer, gay pink nukes. Hopefully, Christopher, that sounds like a much better movie. If you're using your... Okay. Someone's trying to tune in here, and they're having trouble. You are still live. Thank you, Christopher, for telling me. Anyways, and yeah, not a whole heck of a lot of questions. People trying to figure out how to listen to this live stream and not being able to do it. Well, I can't help you with that, because if you can't hear this, then it means I can't help you by, I can't help you get into the live stream if I'm in it already. You know what I mean? So unfortunately, those people are going to have to suffer a little bit, but that's okay. They're welcome to come whenever they're ready, whenever they can get past their technical barriers. Let's then go. What's this? This is, yeah. So Donald Trump says Israel is losing the public relations battle in the Gaza war. So this is article number 2 today that I kind of agree with. So we're going to have a nice, happy, pleasant evening together of articles we agree with. Recently, I watched a nice sort of breakdown of an article about Alexander Dugin that I was completely disagreed with. Maybe next time that has to be our article in question. But anyways, it says, is Israel... I don't want to have the video. I don't want to get banned. Oh, video, go away. Anyways, as Israel is fighting a war against Hamas, former President Donald Trump suggests that the country is losing a separate conflict, a battle of public relations. Unfortunately, I can't do a Trump impression. I can do a few good impressions, but not Trump. So I'll just read it in a more normal voice here. I think Israel has to do a better job of public relations, frankly, because the other side is beating them at the public relations front, Mr. Trump said in an interview with Univision obtained by Semaphore. The president previously bashed Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying he was not prepared for the Hamas attack on the 7th of October, in which hundreds of people were kidnapped and more than 1,000 were killed, possibly by the Israelis actually shooting them, as is being revealed. Another PR failure, because Hamas didn't have the potential to blow up all those cars. He also said that Mr. Netanyahu let us down before the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani in 2020. I don't quite know what he's referring to there. That's one that you guys might be able to help me with. How could Netanyahu have let him down in that regard? Didn't give him the intelligence info? Well, they certainly had enough info to kill him, so yeah. In the latest interview, Mr. Trump refined his take, calling the Israeli leader strong. The former president also suggested that if he were president, he would have pushed for a negotiation with Iran and could have prevented the deadly attack. Well, if you blow up Soleimani and you take credit for it, which some people are not even really sure if Trump actually really ordered it, and he just took credit for it as kind of like to, well, it's one thing that happens to Putin a lot over the years, is something happens, and Putin has to kind of decide whether he's going to put a stamp on it or not. And with Trump, if he were to say that there are assassinations that just go on all the time without him having any oversight over it, he might have gotten scared of saying that. The military is just out there killing people. He has no control over the ship. So there's one theory that he sort of agreed to take the blame for that in order to sort of keep America afloat, or keep himself afloat. Quote, we would have had to deal with Iran, he said. Probably not. Iran was broke, I say respectfully. They were broke. Okay, Mr. Trump bolstered a statement by saying we are actually getting along with Iran when he was president. Again, maybe a little bit, but not till the Soleimani thing. So anyways, it says the Palestinians learned to hate Jewish people in the earliest forms of school, whatever their form of school is. But Israel hatred, he said, there's no hatred like the Palestinian hatred of blah, 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 blah. Okay, aside from this content, the Univision interview is steeped in controversy. It's reported that the first interview the former president has had on the network since he kicked out one of its anchors, Jorge Ramos, from a 2015 campaign event. Okay, interesting. Well, Trump likes to do stuff like that. So anyways, what about this? Is Trump right? Or I should say, why do I think Trump is right? Because, well, friends, one thing that he didn't mention that I think we should, I'm going to have a sip of juice from a berry that exists in Russia that doesn't exist in America. It's orange, as you can see from the stain on the glass. It is delicious. But we don't have them in America, or at least I've never seen them. But, so what is the one kind of thing that maybe Trump missed is that the Palestinians would have virtually zero, maybe inside the Arab world, Arab-speaking world, they would have probably had a few victories. But in the global sort of sense, the Palestinians would not be winning the information war, which they are, if it weren't for the alternative media. So it is. It is a lot of people. Some people we've had on the show. Like if you remember Chris from the Twice Told Tales podcast, who told us a lot of things about the realities of how things are done in Israel that maybe we don't know from the inside. We've had a few people come on. Recently, our good friend who likes to remain unnamed, the former U.S. Army officer, talked about some inner workings of Israel Force as well. And it's really the alternative media, because things happen, and the alternative media is, let's just say, somewhat sympathetic to the Palestinian side, or I should say, maybe they just hate the other side. But c'est la vie. Trump missed the fact that the whole reason this is happening is because of the alternative media. If there was no alternative media, this would not be possible. We would still be back in a different universe where everything was much more monolithic. There were sort of single narratives that only got challenged by weird people who talk to each other on ham radio in like North Dakota, and that's it. So that's a major aspect of this. But also Hamas has been able to really, and one thing is in a very organized way. I say organized because they're so good at it that it almost seems like every hospital that's still active, every dead body that could possibly be filmed, they are filming it and filming it and filming it. They are filming battles, filming battles, filming people after they're dead, unfortunately filming people during surgery to save their lives, filming people being pulled out of the rubble that was created, by Israel bombing their apartment blocks, this, that, or the other. They are sort of filming everything, and in a pretty decent and professional way. So one of the other things, too, is Hamas, if they invested in anything, they invested in a lot of good cameras. It's just kind of that simple. And it also shows the difference. And I think in some ways, although obviously, like I mentioned, when everyone speaks the same language, Arabic, information travels better. So, even in Russia, even though like Kyrgyzstan is far away, if something happens there and it's kind of bad, we'll hear about it. Just like when the Beslan school shooting happened. Well, school shooting in the context of it was done by ISIS-like terrorists. People in Kazakhstan, they had a day of mourning. They took note of that. The rest of the world, outside the former Soviet Union, didn't care. But when there's sort of a linguistic link, you can usually get information from stuff. But I think that even for a lot of people who speak Arabic as a native language, I think the extent to how bad things are in Palestine and what's happening there may have even surprised them, and that's where the outrage is coming from. I don't think that the average person really knew just how bad it was until this is going on. Myself included, because I always tried to be as neutral as I could about a conflict that I don't really know that much about, because I do not speak Arabic, I do not speak Hebrew, I am not an expert on the Levant, and I don't pretend to be one, and I don't want to pretend to be one, but, let's just say as of recently, a lot of the attitudes and actions taken by Israel sort of confirmed what a lot of alternative media sources have been telling me over time. So in the battlefield that is my mind, the alternative media has won, and they can't win the battle if they don't exist. So something very, very important. And I think also to the other problem that the Israelis face is that the sort of smug racial religious superiority, that is like an internal way to talk. So, for example, with the weird spokes tranny that the Ukrainians had, remember, he, she, it, they got fired because they said some horrific things in English about the Russians being subhuman and being murdered to the last one and all this stuff, right? And why did that person get fired when they said absolutely the same things that, like, the Kiev regime and all the private battalions and the ideologues of these Banderite movements and all that? They've been saying this exact stuff, since, quietly since before 2014, and very, very extremely loudly and in your face after 2014. Why? Because it was said in English. and it was said in English by someone who specifically was in their role to project and communicate outwards in English. And so the Israeli inner sort of logic of the way they do things is very supremacist. If you listen to them talk, in fact, I just sort of shared a video about how like the one like guy's just like, we need to have all the Mohammeds be in Europe and not here. Like, you know, it is very they do see themselves as being the exceptional nation, like America does. That's one thing that we share in common with our Israeli cousins, as we are both indispensable and exceptional nations. But that sort of rhetoric that's needed for them for the inside, unfortunately leaks outside, because a lot of people there have dual citizenship with the United States or Western countries. A lot of them speak English as a native language. A lot of them also speak Russian as a native language and various other different native languages. So they're not quite so able to kind of put on like this super hardcore supremacist face for internal use, and then have like a different type of marketing and face for external use. It's not working. Like, if you remember, the Israel delegation like went to the UN with like the yellow stars, harkening back to the horrible repressive eras, or it's one time period. So the horrible repressive era of, like, you know, the late 30s, World War II, 40s, right? Harkening back to those sort of dark days. No one cared. They got zero sympathy for that, because they're not able to sort of have this, I guess, two-faced sort of double, you know, marketing and policy. But I say two-faced, which sounds evil, because generally, even if you have a message that's a nice message, you kind of have to package that message differently depending on the audience. That's one thing that my buddy Joaquin Flores, who has an amazing channel, if you guys are fans of Joaquin, tell him that he's a genius, because I've talked to him about this before, and he would say that you really have to always adjust your message to your audience. So I'm not saying that it's bad that Israel would want to try to have a different internal messaging to an external messaging, but the problem is that the internal messaging leaks out to the outside because of the unusual situation that Israel is in, with having so many dual citizens and native speakers, and this, that, and the other. And actually, surprisingly, having a lot of liberals. That's one thing I don't, didn't really understand when they were building Israel. There are a lot of people there who are liberal. And it's like, you want to have this religious nationalist society that's exclusive, but you're also kind of liberal. How does that work? Don't know. Then again, a lot of our libertarian friends also have the same thing. If it's like, I want to live in a society that's completely open and anyone can do whatever they want, but I want it to be only with white people. Like, wait, what? What? That seems like a pretty big form of restriction. Are you sure you want to live in a society that's that open? Maybe you actually don't want freedom. Something to think about. Something to think about there, friends. Anyways, let's see. Are there any comments at all, or am I just blathering on? Is anyone even listening? Because today, I really haven't been seeing. No, people are listening. In fact, like over 20 are. What is going on? So are there any questions here for this one? Speaking of groceries in Russia, okay, can you get tomatillos in a Russian grocery store? I've never seen them, but I am not the overlord of Mexican food. I mean, I like it, but it's not something. The best thing I've ever seen is, at least in the past, you used to get this, like, the taco mix. It is stinky, but it is delicious. Your entire house will smell like tacos, but those tacos will be good. So they used to at least have that. There's a store called Azbuka Vkusa, which is like the ABCs of flavor. And you should go there because they have like the most foreign stuff. So anyways, are these any questions? Can you give us an update on the American Village? Sure, I'll do that. And then I think we might actually go into phase 2 of this live stream. You know what, guys? Actually, because the American Village stuff is not really super relevant to what I just did, let's call it here, friends. So we're going to take a brief pause with this live stream, and the brief pause is going to be real brief. Anyways, Tim Kirby Russia, I hope you enjoyed this breakdown of 2 articles. If you enjoyed, having a sort of article breakdown and discussion. Let me know if you thought it was terrible because I read very badly. Also, let me know in the comments, okay? Tim Kirby Russia, signing out.